Okay, so we were talking about your university career.
Yep.
We were talking about the attrition rate through the university and the students, and now we're coming to when you're leaving university and first going to hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you do that as part an undergraduate program, or was that all postgraduate?
Oh, this is just what do you call it? Postgraduate, yeah, postgraduate course. I graduated, and this is
So what they do nowadays is they have
this is not
clinical
postgraduate
rotation.
study. This is postgraduate work.
Right. So you're not a doctor at that stage.
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
you're qualified, but you're not. You haven't got your full qualification. Until you've done your so many years in a hospital.
Okay.
I think it was 1 year in a hospital. Then,
Right. Yours was.
then you're
Bundaberg.
qualified to go out.
And so, what was it like at Bundaberg Hospital?
Extraordinary. More to do with the personality of the superintendent, a fellow called Des O'Rourke. And
So, in general, was it a big hospital,
no.
small hospital? Des O'Rourke was there managing how many
So the
students?
population of Bundaberg would have been 20,000, 25,000, I'm not sure, but not very big at all.
Yeah.
And we had Des O'Rourke was the general surgeon, and so he did all the surgery. He was the superintendent, and he did the surgery. There was another surgeon in the town, a fellow called Scott, Scott, I've forgotten his first name, and he also did a bit of surgery. We didn't see much of him. There was a private hospital in town, and I suppose that's where all the private surgery used to go. And but I established sort of relationships there that for example, Larry Perrott was there, and he went on to become surgeon superintendent in Cairns. Murphy. What was his name? So was
These are your colleagues.
the that I've
Maintained contact with.
yeah. I ring them every Christmas, just to keep in contact, and then I would see. I can't remember. It's one of those, just a mental block thing, because I know him so well.
That's all right. If it comes to you, we'll come back to it.
So I had friends in Bundaberg. We used to go to the pub every Friday night.
Were you a big drinker?
Not then. It was Hobart.
That's where it really took off.
Well, yes, drinking far too much. Hobart, and it wasn't a big issue in it was a funny thing in Bundaberg. If we were having some sort of there was the residence quarters, and we could sort of sometimes have a few people over and would be drinking, and then if Des O'Rourke knew that we were sort of there drinking, he'd come over.
Mm.
And he used to have a fair bit to drink.
So you would have been around the 24 kind of mark?
Yeah.
Des would have been...
Des would have been 30, 35, I'm not sure. Des was a very intelligent fellow, very knowledgeable fellow, very wide interested in all sorts of things. And he was a big educational thing as far as I was concerned. Some of the residents didn't like him at all. They thought he was that he had a personality disorder, and I suppose he did. But as far as I was concerned, he was a font of information as far as I was concerned.
What kind of made people think he had a personality disorder? Was he a bit...
Oh, he was. Well, I suppose he was manic depressive. He'd sort of get into a manic phase, and then he'd sort of next thing you know, he'd be depressed. I never sort of found him depressed. I never found that a problem. But he's, he'd sort of get worked up about things. Anyway, it was no problem as far as I was concerned. He was, I found him interesting. I found, even in his manic phases, he'd be saying things that I thought were very interesting.
Mm.
An unusual character. He was a very educated man. He'd...
So you said he had very wide interests. Is there any in particular that you can...
He was interested in all sorts of things. He'd be interested in history, He'd be interested in British history. He had been to England, This was... We all wanted to go to England in those days. We all thought that our education was not complete until we'd been to England. Des had been there, and I thought he'd sort of picked up a hell of a lot,
Mm.
And he used to talk about, if I was talking to Des, I might say 2 words and he said 100,
Mm.
But anyway, I was quite happy to accept that. Other guys would say, he's such a bore, you can't get a word in. Well, that didn't worry me. I thought, this is quality stuff,
Mm.
And so he'd come over and he'd, I suppose as much as anybody, he'd talk to me, and he used to sort of, I know that he said, so and so, you can't tell him anything. He'll never be up to much.
This is one of the other
other doctors, yeah, and it was true.
Mm.
And Whereas I'm sure, you know, you could learn a lot from Des, you know, and but he used to drink too much, and he was bipolar, manic depressive, if you like, you know, and he aspired to. He always wanted to get back to Brisbane. He thought, you know, he could be. He was a very good surgeon, but a surgeon of erratic judgment, I'd say.
Mm.
But technically very skillful. I've seen it. I've seen a surgeon sort of, you know, operating and getting into some sort of trouble. This is at the hospital, and then say, oh, I don't know what to do. Give Des a ring. Des had come in, and with a few deft strokes would expose the problem, you know. I mean, I had a lot of respect for his ability, but his judgment was the problem. And, you know, he would operate on people where he shouldn't have operated on them, things like that.
Yeah. So you said he was a surgeon? Was it common practice for doctors?
Yeah. Well, all those hospitals up the coast of Queensland, they all had a superintendent, and they all needed a surgeon. They had to have a surgeon, you know. And you know, you can get by without a physician, but you can't get by without a surgeon. If somebody's got appendicitis, somebody's got to remove it, you know. Or, you know, whatever the thing is, somebody's got to do it. And so, I mean, they would, you know, as they get bigger, then they get surgeons on the staff, you know, staff surgeon, and then you don't need you know, you can have a superintendent and you know, it doesn't have to be a surgeon. But in those days, they didn't have the luxury of having staff specialist surgeons. So they're all like that apparently. You know, the surgeons and they're all big personalities. So he.
So Des influenced you somewhat to.
Very much so. I thought, you know.
But he had learnt in England, and you felt that was the right call for you to follow.
Actually, we all thought it at the time. You know, probably don't realise quite, you know, the pull that England had on my generation. It was we all wanted to go home to see what it was like, and then we sort of, you know, had a look at England and said, yeah, I could live here easily, but anyway, I want to go. I prefer to live in Australia, you know.
So talk a little bit about how you got across to England and back again. Is that when you were a ship's doctor?
Yeah, well then, so I went to Hobart first, and
so I'm getting it a little bit out of order. So,
well, that's right. But anyway,
Hobart
was.
Let's get the order correct. So you did
2 years in
2 years in Bundaberg with Des, and then where did you go after that?
Then I went to Hobart.
Okay.
I had to apply for a job, and you know, being a resident in Bundaberg was no great recommendation. It wasn't easy to get a job from there. So one of the jobs that came up was the pathology registrar in Hobart Royal Hobart Hospital, and I got that job because nobody else was applying for that, I think.
Was that a good position for you? Were you happy with it, or was it?
In the end, no. I wanted to go back in to do ordinary medicine. You know, it was a bit too sterile, if you like, not enough contact, not enough people, you know.
Mm.
And so so I did a year as pathology registrar, and then I decided no, I'd rather go and be a medical registrar. So that's what I did. Whether rightly or wrongly, I might have been better off, you know, staying in pathology. Who knows? But anyway, don't regret it.
Yeah. Pathology is blood, so it was testing of blood.
Yeah. It's bacteriology, it's histology, it's biochemistry, it's haematology. You know.
Mm.
So it's look at blood under the microscope, measure chemicals in the blood with all the fancy machinery, you know, bacteriology, you sort of put things up for culture and then look at them under the microscope. Anyway, it was not wasted, but I certainly found then I became a medical registrar, and I found that much more stimulating.
So you became a medical registrar also in Hobart?
Yeah.
And it was around this time that you met Mum?
I met her when I was the pathology registrar.
Okay.
She seemed to think there was something special about pathology registrars.
The registrar.
Foolish person.
Quite fortunate for us.
Yeah. And anyway, and then so I can remember driving around, you know, I had friends. I had a girl that I was sort of spent a lot of time with in Bundaberg, but I wasn't over enamoured, and so I went to Hobart, and I couldn't believe it. You know, I would drive around Bundaberg, sort of wondering, what the hell am I going to do? You know, what am I going to do here? I'll just go for a drive, you know. And you could go to the pub, but there's only so much, you know. I mean, there was a certain routine, you know, that we'd all sort of meet at a certain hotel on a certain day, you know, that sort of thing. There might have been a couple of nights a week, maybe, but golf became very important in Bundaberg because there's nothing else to do. You'd spend all your time at the golf club, and but anyway, I went to Hobart and I couldn't believe it. It was the party capital of the world as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
And,
so a lot of parties, a lot of drinking, a lot of young people.
Yeah.
Just a bigger population.
Bigger population, and one of the big things there was that in Bundaberg everybody would go home, you know, at night, you know, they'd all go home. Whereas in Hobart, these were all people, they weren't local Hobart people. There were some local Hobart people, but most of them were interstate, you know, and so they didn't live permanently in Hobart. They'd be there temporarily, you know, and so they're all looking for something to do, you know, and so there was a terrific social life.
So you met a bunch of young people. You friends mostly with doctors, or did you make friends outside of the hospital?
I met Garrett there. Garrett Jones. Hugh.
So how did
Hugh Hamilton.
So Garrett's an important part of our family, so do you want to talk about how you met him?
I would have met him. Well, one of the important things that happened down in Hobart was that there was this the Miss Australia contests. There was an organisation down there that sort of provided the backup for the Miss Australia contest, you know. Not all that savoury, as it turns out in the end, you know. And but somehow or other, a girl called Geraldine Jennings, beautiful girl, terrific personality. She. How come Geraldine Jennings got talked into sort of doing the Miss Australia thing?
I don't know, darling. It would have been that guy.
That guy, yeah. And
Who's that guy?
so this
guy was sort of an involved person.
So for every the Miss Australia sort of contest organisation sort of provided a local person to sort of help you with raising money, you know, because it's all about raising money. And so Geraldine sort of said she'd do it, and so then all Geraldine's friends were sort of pulled in to raise money. Suzanne sort of raised money. She had a ball, you know, and she made quite a lot of money. I sort of had a pet show. I made no money.
Pet show?
Pet show, yes. We got some land from the council.
Yeah.
They said, yes, you can have that for your pet show. And we got, there were people at the hospital, nurses and whatever, you know. Suzanne sort of became involved. And we had this big pet show.
What's a pet show?
You know,
The most beautiful dog, the fastest dog,
Okay.
the happiest.
That's not something I would have thought Dad would run. That's...
you know, anyway.
Those were the community days.
Yeah.
People involved themselves. Somebody brought a seal.
Really? Wow.
They brought everything you can think of.
And we made no money.
Did the seal win?
I don't.
Everyone.
Suzanne was one of the judges. What happened in the end? I had a car, and in the boot of the car was the pies. The big money earner was going to be the pies. You know, we were given the pies and we were going to sell them, and we were given fish fingers and things like that. You know, and then in the back of the car were all these, in the boot of the car were all these things, and events are the things that affect everything, and so on the day something went wrong with the sound system, so. One of the boys there, Black Pete was his name, said,
what was he called, Black Pete?
He was Maori.
Maori, okay.
And, you know, Maori blood, but you wouldn't know he was Maori to speak to, you know. Very good looking fellow, you know, tall.
In those days, it was the way to just call people Black Pete.
That was an extraordinary thing that he was, you know, that was what they called him. And he was a nice fellow. I liked him, and he said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, "I've got a sound system at home," and he said, "Can I borrow your car?" So he took the car, and he went off and to get the sound system, and oh shit, all the pies were in the boot of the car, you know, because we had heaters and all this, you know, and. No pies. So it was a we didn't make a lot of things happened, but we didn't make any money.
Mm.
So there were chickens, and we were raffling chickens, and nobody was buying any tickets, so we'd just raffle them off, and virtually what people were sort of paying was what they were worth.
What they cost.
We didn't make any money. We would probably be raffling them at a loss,
Mm.
and they were all given to us. We went around before all this, sort of getting donations, and somebody would donate,
So this is all for the Miss Australia pageant.
the Miss Australia contest, yeah.
So Miss Australia contest. But you're raising money just for that, or was the Miss Australia pageant for some greater cause?
No, they probably used to donate money to the disabled children or something like that.
Mm.
And that's where the money was going.
Mm.
And so they'd have Geraldine was Miss Hobart,
No.
Miss Tasmania.
Where was the nurse's home? Anyway, Imperial. She didn't win.
But
Was she was fantastic.
Was she Miss Tasmania?
No.
No, she didn't get there.
Miss Tasmania then went up to Sydney.
Sydney, yeah. She
compete.
didn't. She didn't. No. And so anyway, that's how it worked. And and each thing there'd be a money raiser.
So I suppose what I was asking was, why were you so involved in this? Was it just
Because I was friendly with Geraldine.
Was it just a fun thing to be involved in?
Mm.
Yeah, okay.
And it was very fun.
Mm.
Yeah, we had good fun. That was terrific.
Mm.
And then Geraldine was beautiful. Her friends were beautiful, and us boys all tagged along.
So Garrett was part of those.
Garrett, not very much, but his friend Hugh Hamilton was very much involved in it.
Okay.
And and if you ever went to Hugh and Garrett sort of shared a flat, and if you ever went there, they'd be eating fish fingers because of all these fish fingers that had been donated to me and Suzanne, because Suzanne and I went around to, organisations
Make a donation.
asking them for donations. And why they ever gave it to us beyond me, but they did.
They gave you fish fingers.
To sell at the...
Oh, I see.
And party pies.
Well, pies. And I can remember people were a bit puzzled, and they sort of... but in the end they'd say, oh, well, what's it to us? It's you can have half a dozen pies.
Mm.
Half a dozen?
No, 6 dozen. I don't remember how many, but there were a hell of a lot of pies in the boot, that's what I remember. And Black Pete.
A lot of good boys and girls in that gang, we were a big group of people connected to each other. A lot of the Tasmanians.
So every Friday night, I think it was, they used to go to the St Ives pub, and the girls would go there, essentially
selling tickets
in what?
A raffle.
A raffle, yes, some raffle. And they'd be selling them to all the patrons at the pub. and we used to go along allegedly to protect.
It's a good
Well,
one.
women were not allowed in pubs in those days.
Oh,
in,
yeah.
in New South Wales. You weren't.
Well, this was Tasmania,
Yeah, I know.
and
It was a different thing for us.
and
I'm going to sleep in the flat.
so it was great entertainment.
So it's
The
good.
girls would sort of go around selling, and they'd be talking to people talking, you know. So you weren't just standing there by yourself, you know.
Mm.
There was all this activity going on.
Mm.
Very different to Bundaberg.
Very different. So, Mum was in that same group as you?
Yes, she was friendly with Geraldine,
Yep.
and so she lived. I think Geraldine lived out at the nurses' home in Hobart. I've forgotten where it was in Hobart, but anyway, it was. So Suzanne knew Geraldine from out there. How I knew Geraldine, I don't know, you know. I lived in the resident quarters, which was on top of the hospital. You know, the top floor, it was the fifth floor of the hospital, and that was the resident quarters there. I lived there, and a few of us got together and said, you know, this is a bit dull, you know, in the residence quarters. Nothing happens here. You know, you could have a drink, but it'd only be the, you know, residents themselves.
Mm.
And so we'd like to get a flat outside the hospital. So we went along for an interview with this Mrs. Doyle, I think her name was. I feel sorry for Mrs. Doyle. It shouldn't have happened. It was a terrible thing. But so we went along. Andrew Mather, myself, and a few others, and we sort of interviewed to rent this house, you know, top floor of one of the grand houses in Sandy Bay, not Sandy Bay. Anyway, Battery Point.
Yep.
And you know, you go to Hobart now, and one of the places you've got to go is Battery Point. And anyway, so we rented this place there, and as the Mrs. Doyle said, look, there's just one thing. I don't want you having any parties there. And as we walked out, Andrew Mather said, I'm going to have the biggest party ever. It'll be awesome.
But that was the whole idea. You were moving out.
No, I was quite happy just to have rent a place there where, you know, where you could have people over and, you know, and have a few drinks and, you know. But anyway, Andrew says he's going to have the biggest parties. Well, we did have these giant parties, and I think that's how I really met Miss Australia, Geraldine Jennings. Geraldine Jennings and her beautiful friend Ros Saunders. And I remember we had a very big party there, and Geraldine and Ros Saunders stayed the night. and it was just good fun, you know. So they were in the double bed together, and I was telling them stories and things like this, you know. But it was all very simple and fun, you know. And there was a big bond there, you know. And I don't think I even knew Suzanne in those days, you know. But it was very soon after that I met Suzanne, probably through Geraldine and Roz.
Yeah.
But so anyway, as I say, you know, Hobart, I always thought it's such a fantastic place. I'm going to come back here and live, you know. But as it turned out, I married Suzanne. Suzanne's mother lived in Wollongong, and Suzanne felt she couldn't get too far away from her mother. I'm sure she would have quite liked to go back to Hobart. But anyway.
So, you meeting Mum,
Yep.
was through this circle of friends. The story you always told us when we were kids was that you were the pathology registrar, and she was the nurse, and you met at Hobart Hospital.
Yes.
She took one look at you and fell so head over heels in love that she just started cartwheeling.
Cartwheeling, yes.
She just couldn't stop.
Yeah, she used to do cartwheels, yeah. But not in those circumstances.
Not on your account.
No.
But how did it develop from acquaintances to interests to something more?
Well, you know, it was a sort of romantic sort of attachment from the word go, I suppose, with Suzanne, you know. And
did you ask her out?
Yeah. As much as Suzanne would sort of say, well, what are you doing tomorrow night? You know, it was...
But I imagine that it would be sort of, there was the phase of we're all going out as friends, and then there would have been...
It mixed up.
Yeah.
And then Suzanne said, well, what are you doing tomorrow night? And I'd say, oh, why don't we do this or something, you know. And then, you know, so we might be sort of going out to a restaurant or, you know, to a bar or something, you know, to a pub. And then the weekend there'd be something on with Hugh Hamilton and crowd. Hugh was a very
entertaining bloke.
He was very popular amongst the nurses. He was a lovely fellow, and he had a car, and he would say, well, why don't we go up to Maria Island and hire a boat or something like that, you know, and he'd take us all up. And so, and Garrett was all part of that, and but he wasn't. Garrett worked for a newspaper, and so he didn't. You know, his time wasn't free. Hugh was the most unusual fellow. He was a he was some sort of insurance salesman.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that's what he was. And he used to, he'd have his clients all over Tasmania, and he'd have to go and sort of see his clients periodically, you know. I mean, that's what they do, don't they? Insurance guys. And so he'd go up to, up to Burnie or something like that. He'd go up there, to see a couple of clients. And he used to say to the nurses, "Does anybody want to come with me?" And they'd go up with him. He'd take a couple of them up, and what they did up there, Anyway, no, but Hugh was a nice fellow, and he would never sort of put the hard word on anyone, But and as much as anything, it would be entertainment, And,
Is he still around here?
He's dead. He was a heavy smoker.
Yeah.
He had a coronary artery occlusion fairly early on. He was in his 50s. And then he had, the next thing that happened, he had cancer of the lung due to cigarette smoking, no doubt. And he was dead by the time he was 60, I suppose.
Yeah.
He was sort of a bit of an entrepreneur, and he took himself up. He married one of the nurses. I can't quite remember her name, but
It wasn't Geraldine or Rose.
no,
Well, they weren't even nurses, were they?
no, they were physios.
Yeah.
And he married one of the nurses, and they decided that they'd go up to New Guinea, and they could see an opportunity in New Guinea for importing food items for the Papuans. So quite simple sort of stuff. Nothing terribly complicated. So imagine you just establish a big store, and just whatever the natives wanted to buy, and so that's what he did. They were making a lot of money, and but I think crooks were involved, and they lost a lot of money. And so he he'd borrowed a lot of money, spent a lot of money in New Guinea, and been robbed of a lot of money in New Guinea, And so it all ended very badly, actually. And he it all ended very badly for Hugh. He bought a very expensive property in Sydney, forgotten where, and we went over there to have a look at it, and we said, "Oh, you're crazy! How the hell did you've spent so much money here?" And Hugh decided that he would throw a big party at this house of his, They'd bought furniture, expensive house, big house, big block of land, and they so that they threw this party, and all these guys that he'd borrowed the money from, bank managers and things like that, they were all invited to the party, and Hughes' assumption was that they'd all think that he was doing terrifically well if they could see all this. I suppose that's right. That's what they did think. And then the shit hit the fan, you know. And Hugh's wife's brother was a priest, and Hugh and Maureen was the name. Hugh and Maureen were up in New Guinea when the banks closed in on, you know, they said we're calling in the money, you know, and they rang Hugh's and Maureen's brother and said, "Oh, look, get to the house, get out whatever furniture you can, you know, because the whole thing has been."
They're taking the lot. You know, if we don't get it now, we'll lose it.
Yeah, and he arrived at the tiny little bloody trailer. Put one thing on the trailer.
Took a couple of chairs.
Yeah. And anyway, so that was. So poor old Hugh, he was a great fellow. But anyway, you know, all very short. I can remember the day we were invited over to Graham Lenzner's, and we were playing tennis somewhere there, you know, and then Graham sort of provided a big lunch for us, and Hugh was there.
So was this back in Hobart or?
No, this is back in Sydney at this stage.
Yeah.
So we. I can see the faces of these people, but I can't remember their names. Dana, and so this particular day, we were having a splendid lunch at Graham Lenzner's place, and Hugh was getting phone calls from New Guinea saying, "Look, you better get here quick, smart. You're going to lose everything." You know, they're closing in on you. They're foreclosing.
The banks are coming.
Yeah, and Hugh was sweating, and you know, we were all having a lovely time. Garrett was there. And Garrett's friend Frank Brophy was there, and Frank Brophy, who was another personality bigger than life, you know. He was, and Frank was sort of dominating the floor, as it were, and Graham was very resentful that it was his house, his party, and you know, and we were all, you know, and Frank Brophy was the most important person, and anyway, it was. It wasn't very long after that
it all went south.
Hugh lost everything, and then he had, the next thing we knew, he had cancer of the lung, cancer of the brain, you know, and he was a goner. And, so it didn't make much difference. He burned bright, you know.
Charlie, So, just going back to your time in Tasmania, this is your first great experience of social life. Do you have any really fond memories or really good stories from that time that you can recall?
In Tasmania? In Tasmania. Memories? I suppose it's difficult without a bit of prompting, actually. Stories in Tasmania?
So you had Garrett and Hugh were there.
Yeah.
Mum, Geraldine and Rose were the girls on the scene. You were starting to go to pubs and running raffles and...
Well, that was all a brief period, I suppose, you know. And there were all sorts of people there. I was friendly with a fellow called David James, who was involved in the Antarctic.
What, exploration?
The Antarctic scientific sort of, not exploration so much as, you know.
So you knew him socially, or?
I knew him very well, very friendly with him.
Yeah.
And for example, one thing that happened, I suppose, with David James was my brother John and a friend of his came down. They really had the best holiday, they said, you know. That was fantastic, you know. I think they stayed at Hugo's flat. Hugh. We used to call him Hugo.
Yeah.
But Hugh's flat, and he and this particular night, it was at Hobart, Sydney to Hobart race, and so they used to, the fleet would come into Hobart, and it was big excitement. Oh, you know, big things. All these guys, and the nurses would all be flocking around them, and you know, they they'd be so this particular time we were invited on to David James was somehow attached to the yacht club, and so he and then he was given the job of looking after a certain yacht. And it was the most fantastic yacht. It was beautiful, you know. It was, you know. I suppose a lot of them were beautiful. I don't know, but anyway, this one was particularly beautiful, and it was probably one of the front runners of the race. You know, big yacht, and his job was to look after them socially, you know. So he said to us, "Oh, come on down, you know, come on, you can join, you can go and have a few drinks there, and you know, have a look at the yacht." And So we all went down to this night on board the yacht, and Hugh brought my brother John and his friend down there, and what I can remember, what was funny about it was Hugo brought John and friend down, and he had Maureen with him at the time, and so he thought, I'm not hanging around here, I'm going off with Maureen somewhere. And so John and friend
left
didn't know what to do. They were left there. Anyway, so what, I suppose. And no, funny things I don't really remember.
So Garrett became a part of your life this time.
Yep.
You would surely have some capers that you and Garrett, some early stories from your friendship with him.
Well, it's funny when you sort of come to concrete things, I sort of have trouble remembering them. Yes, there were, There are a lot of things.
Well, maybe we'll just keep going, and if they come up, we'll add them in.
So more interesting things happened when I sort of said, well, okay, left Hobart. I spent almost a year in Sydney, and then thought to myself, how the hell am I going to get to England? And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you be a ship's doctor? And I was looking around, it was very expensive to go by passenger boat. It was some I can remember it was £1,000 or something like that. £800 to it was £800 to fly, and it was £800 to go by passenger boat. So if you went as a ship's doctor, it was free. It was gratis.
They didn't pay you? Or?
Yes, they did. They paid me sixpence. Okay. They had to. That was there's an arrangement. You'll do this and whatever. Your obligations are, and we will pay you. And it just so happened the amount they paid. They had to pay something, but the amount they paid you was sixpence. And so anyway, I said, well, that sounds fantastic to me. So
what do you mean, sixpence for the whole trip? It's just a token.
Token.
Yeah.
But is that your phone?
No. I'll just go switch that off. Oh, it's answered. Carry on. So this is you signed on as a ship's doctor.
Yeah. And so it was a very interesting time on board a boat. It was a cargo boat. The Arabic, the tonnage was 5,000 tonnes, I think. That's just from the top of my head. I can't. Very small.
But a passenger ship?
No, cargo.
Cargo?
No passengers. They used to, a lot of the cargo boats would have 12 passengers, So I heard. Anyway, there were no passengers on this one, and there were no passengers on the one that I came back on. And Shore Savile was the name of the line. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? Shore Savile. Anyway, but their main business was Britain to New Zealand, and you know, they'd call into Australia on the way. But it was mainly founded because of the sheep, wool industry, I think, and mutton industry, you know, and anyway.
So that was the cargo livestock?
Well, when I didn't even inquire too much as to what, not livestock, but what did they have mainly on board when I was. I don't know. I don't know what the cargo was. And
those days would it even been containerised?
Oh no. So it was a real business as to packing the boats. They had how can I forget? They had wood. You know, things were all sort of crated, wood supports.
Just carry on, Bill.
So there'd be a lot of wood packing, you know, to sort of stabilise the packing, you know. A big job, you know, it has to be properly done. It can't shift. It's got to be, you know. And one of the, at the end of the trip, the chief officer, my understanding was he could sell that wood. That was his bonus sort of thing, you know. And dunnage or something they call it. And anyway, they were interesting fellows. So there was a on board the boat. There were officers and crew. The officers was the captain, the first officer, and then there'd be second officer, third officer, fourth officer. These are deck crew, deck guys. And then there were the engineers, and the chief engineer and second engineer. And then there was the catering staff, so the purser. And every night they would sit down. The captain was, they didn't include the captain, they didn't like including him in their drinking at night. To get drinking in perspective, at lunchtime, we would meet in somebody's cabin, and he would provide the drinks, you know, and everybody would have 2 drinks, 2. That was it, and then they'd have 2 drinks. They'd go into lunch, and then they'd go and have a nap, I think, you know, and then at night time, there was this ad hoc arrangement that they used to. The group didn't include the captain, but it was the first officer, first engineer, and the purser. You know, the guy who looked after the food. And we would meet in a cabin, you know, and if it was in my cabin, I would have a bottle of whiskey for the I'm just trying to think who. But you know, let's say you know the chief engineer would have a bottle of whiskey, the chief officer would have a bottle of gin. I would have a you know bottle of whiskey, and
It's a lot to drink.
I wouldn't drink at all. But it was nothing for
Yeah,
those
it.
guys to do.
Rip into it. Every night?
Most nights.
Yeah.
I can't, you know, I would think most nights. I mean, what else were we going to do? You know, and whether they, I mean, if we were in port, we'd obviously go ashore, and then there was a hell of a lot to drink there too, you know, and.
But you'd be at sea for many weeks without
going to port, yeah. So so we sailed from Newcastle around to Fremantle, and then from Fremantle we went around the Cape. In fact, we went to Cape Town, so that was the first stop, which was fascinating for me. You know, this is the first overseas place I'd been, Cape Town. And they told me there, the officers on board would say, "Oh, you don't want to go ashore," you know. So, I mean, we arrived during the night, and so first thing in the morning, I just had to go ashore, you know. And they said, "Oh, you want to be careful. There'll be blacks, you know, and anything can happen." And you know, I found that I went ashore, and there were white men there, and the white men all had big walking sticks. That was one of the things I noticed.
beating the blacks.
I thought it was a weapon, yeah. And yet it was all very peaceful, you know. But and then I went uptown, and there was nothing much. It was nothing very exciting. And I was standing outside it was a place that was selling musical instruments and recording radios and things like that, you know. And I was standing outside looking in, and there was a Negro guy, you know, standing beside me, and then somebody came and said, "Oh, sir, would you like to come in?" And I looked at that to see what what the Negro fellow would do, and he just sort of, you know, walked away. And I went in and sort of stood around for a while, and then thought, oh, you know, I'm not terribly interested in this, and then just walked back to the ship, really. And, that was my experience of Cape Town racial sort of relationships. And,
sort of been in early 70s?
67.
Right.
And so then the next stop, I mean, we only stopped in Cape Town to what they call bunker, you know, take on board
Food.
diesel.
Oh, right, okay. Yep.
And undoubtedly they handled the other thing too, I suppose. But you know, but that wasn't the reason. The real pressing reason is you've got to get fuel. And the next place we went to sort of to get fuel was Cocos Island. which was off the coast of Africa, North Africa, near Gibraltar. And anyway, holiday island, Spanish island, and again, nobody wanted to go ashore. And they said, "Oh no, I've been here before. I don't want to go there again." You know, this sort of thing. You know, and I thought, "Well, I've got to go. I've got to see this." And so I went. So I walked ashore. It was, you know, a very attractive tourist town, I suppose I'd say. And so palm trees down the centre of the town, and you know, beautiful buildings, and then as I walked along, I don't know if I've ever told you this story before, but this is one of the more interesting stories. I realised somebody was following me, and so I sort of accelerated, and he'd sort of accelerate. I'd go round a corner, and he'd bloody go round a corner, you know, and I was starting to get a bit panicky, thinking this is my first day in Europe, you know, and this is all going very badly, and I was on my own because nobody else wanted to
come ashore.
They were all asleep, I think, on board the boat, and so this was at night, and late at night, and then I thought, how am I going to what am I going to do? And then I could see in the distance, I could see a whole lot of people, and they were on the beach. So it was an island resort sort of place, and so I went down there, and to my horror, he followed me down. I went onto the beach, sand. He followed me onto the sand, you know, and then I saw him standing there, taking his belt off. I thought, shit, what the hell is this?
I'm really in trouble. This is getting even worse.
Yes.
I thought it was just going to rob me.
Well, that's what I assumed he was going to do anyway. You know, well, that's what I was worried he was going to do. Who knows? He could have been a bloody gay for all I know.
Yeah.
And which I wouldn't have had a clue. You know, how would I know? You know, I knew nothing about gays, and I thought there's only one thing I can do here. There was a restaurant there, and I went over to the restaurant. I stood in the doorway of the restaurant, and I stayed there until I was sure he wasn't around. And then I just went back to the boat.
That was your first taste of Europe.
Yes. And then I went on to
London. London or?
The boat went into Yorkshire, Hull.
Okay.
And so we went into Hull, and then I got a train down from Hull down to London.
I better make another break in this recording. So just this is your arrival into London.
England, London.